It all began with just one punch. Not in a movie, not in a comic book, but right there on the arcade screen. A girl stands alone on a city sidewalk, and then out of nowhere, a gang of rough-looking thugs show up. One of them steps forward and without warning, punches her square in the stomach. She falls, the gang grabs her, and disappears into the shadows. Sounds kinda spot on to what we just saw. Now, players at the time in the arcade didn't expect this. The scene felt raw and uncut. It felt real. This wasn't a cute platformer or a spaceship shooter. This was something else entirely. This was the opening to Double Dragon. And this game right here changed everything. Back in 1987, arcades were already filled with loud, colorful games, but Double Dragon was different. It was gritty, it was bold, and it introduced something totally new, the beat 'em up genre. A style of game where players walk through the streets and fight enemies using punches, kicks, and whatever weapons they could find along the way. Steel bats, knives, boxes, barrels. If you could pick it up, you could use it. And here's the coolest part, you didn't have to do it alone. For the first time ever in a game like this, you could play side by side with a friend. Two players shoulder to shoulder, throwing punches, dodging attacks, and fighting through waves of enemies together. So this wasn't just about high scores anymore. It was about survival, teamwork, and a little bit of style. The mission? Simple, but unforgettable. Rescue the girl. Now in this story, her name is m.a.m.e, and she gets kidnapped by a vicious gang called the Black Warriors. In the arcade, depends on which version you play. Now originally you play as Spike and Hammer, twin martial artists with fists of fury and hearts of gold. Later on, they become Billy and Jimmy in the console versions, but in arcade, it's strictly Spike and Hammer. And your goal, beat the game, save the girl, and survive the streets. But Double Dragon was more than just another arcade game, it was a cultural moment. It inspired dozens of clones, sequels, and spin-offs. It helped shape the look and feel of arcade games for years to come. And even today, nearly 40 years later, it still packs a punch. So how did it all come together? And what made it stand out? So stay with me, because this is the story of Double Dragon, the grandfather of beat-em-up games. Before the streets were filled with digital fists and flying kicks, video games were a lot simpler. Most of the games in arcades were about jumping over barrels, zapping aliens, or driving fast as you could. You had huge hits like Donkey Kong, you had Pac-Man, who ran through the mazes gobbling pellets and dodging ghosts. You also had Space Invaders, where players defended the Earth from rows of invading aliens. Now, as great as those games were, one thing was missing, a true street fight. And don't get me wrong, there were games that let you throw punches and kicks. In 1984, you had Kung Fu Master, which let you walk from left to right, beating up enemies floor by floor. And this game inspired many others with side-by-side platforming and actually got a home version. And in 1986, Technos Japan released Renegade, which added a more gritty urban feel. It was inspired by real-life street fights and gang movies. Renegade even let you move in multiple directions, which was a huge deal at the time. And Renegade in its own right was the American translation from the Japanese version, which definitely deserves its own video, the Kunio series. But anyway, there was a problem with all those great games. You were fighting alone. So the developers at Techno started thinking, what if you didn't have to fight by yourself? What if you had a friend you could team up with? You could help each other survive waves of enemies, take down the bosses together. I mean, it would be more exciting and feel more realistic. Not to mention the fact that it would make money twice as fast. You figure if you play by yourself, the other player has to wait until it's their turn to play. But if you're playing two at the same time, that's double the money if you're playing with another person. And that's how the idea for Double Dragon was born. Yoshihisa Kishimoto, one of the lead creators, wanted to go even bigger than Renegade. He loved American action movies, especially ones like The Warriors and Enter the Dragon. Now these films were packed with street fights, intense music, tough heroes, and big dramatic showdowns. Kishimoto didn't just want to make a game, he wanted to make an interactive movie. So in 1987, Double Dragon hit arcades, and it was a total game changer. For the first time ever, two players could walk side by side through a dangerous city, beating up thugs, using weapons, and helping each other survive. You could punch, kick, throw enemies, and even pick up bats, whips, and knives. It felt intense and it looked awesome at the time. And most importantly, beyond Double Dragon being so awesome, it was the birth of the co-op beat-em-up genre. It gave players a feeling of teamwork, of grit, of being in a real fight together. And once Double Dragon hit arcades, the world of video games would never be the same again. Now, let's talk about the gameplay. How did Double Dragon actually play? And at the start of the game, you pick Spike and Hammer. Now for the remainder of this video, I know it's Spike and Hammer for the arcade because that's what we're talking about today, but I will refer to them as Billy and Jimmy Lee, just for simplicity's sake. Or even Bimmy Lee, if you know what I'm talking about. These guys just aren't regular street fighters, they're skilled martial artists. But trouble finds them fast. In the game's shocking opening moment, A gang called the Black Warriors punches Billy's girlfriend Marion in the stomach and drags her away. No words, no warning, just pure chaos. And that's when the action kicks off. From the very first step, the game throws you into a rough side-scrolling brawl. You walk from left to right, up and down, through city streets, a forest area, an industrial site, and the gang leader's fortress. But this time, you're not alone. If somebody else elects to play with you, you can team up with a friend, complete stranger, brother, sister, whoever decides to put another quarter in with you. But to go with that, it wasn't just mindless button mashing. Double Dragon had real fighting mechanics. Even though they were limited, you still had a set of moves. Now you could punch and kick, sure, but you also had jump, you could grab enemies, you could throw them across the screen, and you had the infamous elbow. Now you did have a kick that was kind of like that, but if you timed it just right, the elbow smash became your most powerful move. And players quickly learned it was a game changer against tough enemies and bosses. And the weapons? You had plenty of weapons. You could pick up baseball bats, whips, knives, even oil drums and crates. And you could smash your enemies with them, or if you had a box or a barrel, you could throw it. Each item added a whole new layer of strategy. Do you go and swing with the bat? Do you go at it alone with hand-to-hand combat? Or do you just cheese the game with the elbow? And the enemies weren't just punching bags either. Each one had their own personality and fighting style. Now you had a Bobo, the giant ball guy with a face that looked like he'd been through 100 bar fights. He was kind of slow, but his main thing, he had some quick punches, he could toss you in the air, and he had this ugly kick. And you had Linda, the leather-clad gang member who attacked with the whip, but she could throw a mean punch when she wanted to. And then you had William and Ropar, or Lopar, depends on which version you play. And the differences between those characters are, William did everything Ropar did, but Ropar could pick up actual boxes, rocks, or whatever. For some reason, William didn't do that. But one thing William had that Roper didn't was he'd punch you twice, and then he had this like punch where he'd punch you in the stomach. So even though it was slight changes, each character did have their own personality. And a Bobo kind of had a little bit of personality too. Sometimes he had a mohawk, sometimes he wouldn't, and sometimes he was even green. Now to round out our cast of characters, you had the guy that looked just like you guys, Double Dragon, but he had a mohawk. The green guy can do all your moves. He did them a little more slow, but he could do all the moves. He had the elbow, he had that reverse kick, and he could actually grab you and knee you in the head and throw you just like you did with all the rest of the enemies. And he was kind of cheap too because he punched faster than you could, and he had this cheap uppercut he could do at will. And his name is Jeff, if you didn't know. Yeah, that's his actual name, Jeff. And lastly, you got the big baddie of the game, nicknamed Machine Gun Willie, real name Willie Mackey. Yeah, that's actually a thing, but most people just call him Machine Gun Willie. That's canon. So with our cast out the way, what really made the game special was how the levels felt like chapters in a gritty action movie. You start with a broken down city slum, then move to the dusty factories with crashing machinery, and then came the longest stage in the game, the woods. And you went through the woods, had the infamous jump with the bridge, made your way through the cliff, jumped down to a small industrial part, and finally made it to the Black Dragon's headquarters. And each stage brought new scenery, new music, and new threats. So it wasn't just a fight, it was also trying to navigate your way through the stages. And what made this game cool also, it didn't need long cutscenes or voice acting. The gameplay told the story, and for players back in the 80s, that was awesome. Double Dragon showed the world that action games could have drama, teamwork, strategy, and heart, all packed into a few quarters and one unforgettable screen. Now, Double Dragon for me, that game, I can't even count. That one and probably Ninja Turtles, probably a close second. Well, maybe Street Fighter 2. So my favorites probably were that had the most impact on me. Double Dragon's probably definitely one of the games that had the most impact at the time. Ninja Turtles, the original one, definitely had a huge impact as well, and Street Fighter 2, if you will. But those three games were probably my favorites in the arcades growing up. I mean, there was plenty of other ones, but Double Dragon stood out. That was my first one, and just the music. Now, the game was so huge in my mind that I remember it was the Christmas of 1987. That's when the game came out in 1987. And that Christmas, I ended up getting my NES, the deluxe pack with Rob the Robot and all that. And then I also had an Etch-a-Sketch animator. And I don't know if you've been around from that time, you'll know what the Etch-a-Sketch animator was. Basically, it was like an Etch-a-Sketch, but it was electronic and it was animated. It was kind of a computerized version of it. And I would actually draw the animations of the Double Dragon characters. You know how they just kind of walk. I would draw that. I'd hum the music all the time. It was just a really, really cool game. Had a huge impact, and it was only a quarter. You know, some places 50 cents, but most 50 cents to start, 25 cents to continue. But the game was everywhere. You could find Double Dragons in 7-Elevens. It was kind of like how Street Fighter 2 kind of came with that resurgence. Double Dragon kind of did that as well. It was that popular. I mean, it was everywhere. Pizza Hut, the mall. Little mom and pop shops, 7-Eleven, White Hen, if you're from the Midwest, you know what White Hen was. It was everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere, any arcade, without having 2 to 3 Double Dragon machines. Now, after fighting your way through streets filled with danger, dodging knives, cracking skulls with baseball bats, and take down wave after wave of gang members, you finally make it to the very end. And it's been a long, hard road full of intense battles and teamwork. And now standing in your way is the last boss, Machine Gun Willie. Now, Willie isn't like other enemies. He pulls out a machine gun. He's ready to end everything right then and there. Anyway, the battle is tough, but if you manage to defeat Willie, you'll get a quick breath of relief. The screen changes, and there she is, M.a.m.e tied up, waiting to be rescued. So you think most times that's the end, right? But then something completely unexpected happens. I know it blew me away the first time. Right when you think the mission is over and you're about to celebrate with your buddy, the game does something no one saw coming at the time. If you were playing with a friend, stranger, or whoever, side by side, fighting through everything together, the game suddenly turns you against each other. The screen doesn't fade to black, there's no congratulations. Instead, it's you versus a friend in a one-on-one fight. No teamwork, no good sportsmanship, because only one of you guys gets to walk away with M.a.m.e. And this twist shocked everyone at the time. Up until that moment, Double Dragon had been all about working together. 2 players teaming up to defeat the enemies, protect each other, and save the day. But now the game was asking something new, something no other arcade game had done before. It was asking you to fight your partner. And the prize, M.a.m.e.'s love. Now, when I saw that, I was playing with just this random guy at the time, and at the time we really didn't know too much about the elbow. And I can easily beat Double Dragon on a quarter now, but back then you probably spent about $1, $1.25 trying to get through this game. And then because the elbow, we didn't know about that at the time. At the beginning, you just kind of did punches and kicks, maybe the drop kick. So the elbow kind of came after the fact. So and honestly, I'm gonna be real with you. You can kind of meaty your opponent with the elbow. You can knock them down and keep throwing the elbow. And when I say meaty, what I mean is throw your animation out and your hitboxes out as a person gets up. But believe it or not, the elbow really only works on the computer because the computer's dumb. If you're playing with a real person, you kind of got to get in there and just outplay him or her, who is who you're playing with. And weapons, probably not a good idea to pick weapons up. And one thing I'll point out as well, when you're playing against an actual person in Double Dragon, for some reason, when you grab them and knee them in the head, you kick them. You normally it's just 4 times when you're playing against an enemy, but for some reason when you're playing against another person, you get about 8 knee shots, and the damage seems to be a little less when you're hitting your opponent. Now, it was kind of a shock at the time, and what made it even worse was the fact that you guys were on equal footing. There was no like a fighting game where you can have an advantage. It was kind of, you both could do the same things, you both had the same amount of energy. So whoever lost, you just flat out lost, and that could be a blow to a kid's ego back then. So let's talk about the success of Double Dragon. When Double Dragon hit arcades in 1987, it was like lightning in a bottle. All across the world, from the crowded game centers of Tokyo to the pizza parlors of New York and the neon-lit arcades of London, kids gathered around the glowing arcade cabinets. Quarters clinked into machines, joysticks clicked, and speakers blasted that unforgettable beat-em-up soundtrack. It wasn't just a game, it was a moment in gaming history. What made Double Dragon so popular, you ask? A big part of it was the action-packed gameplay. For the first time, players could team up side by side in a scrolling beat-em-up, and the idea of you and your buddy working together to punch and kick your way through wave and wave after bad guys was exciting and fresh. And then it was a little bit edgy without being just over the top. And by the end of 1987 and well into 1988, Double Dragon was one of the top-selling arcade games on the planet, and they couldn't put the games out fast enough. The arcade cabinets were in such high demand that some locations had to order extra machines just to keep up with the crowd. I mean, it wasn't just a hit. I mean, Double Dragon was a phenomenon. It was the, like I say, it was the grandfather of beat-em-ups, and it was nothing like it at the time. Now, with Double Dragon's popularity, naturally, game companies wanted to bring that same experience into people's homes. The most famous home version of Double Dragon came to the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. Kids everywhere begged their parents for it. The box art looked awesome, the game was big, and excitement was real. But when they turned the game on, something was missing. The NES version didn't include the 2-player co-op from the arcade. That meant only one player could go through the story at a time. And this was a huge letdown for fans who had played together in the arcades. Instead though, the game did add a new versus mode, where 2 players could fight one-on-one, like in a fighting game. It was kind of fun. I remember that Double Dragon, I stood on my head to get it. I didn't get it right away. I had a buddy of mine that had it, and I begged him to bring it over. I said, come on dude, he said, I got Double Dragon. And he didn't even like Double Dragon. He accidentally got it. His parents bought him that just cause whatever. Maybe his dad bought it because his dad liked Double Dragon, I don't know. But he had it. So I begged him to bring it over. And when he finally brought it, I was like, oh man, we're gonna play some Double Dragon. I was so stunned that it was 1 player. That was huge. That was a big blow. And they did kind of put that like versus mode in there. And believe it or not, it was actually fun. I did enjoy playing that because you could actually pick. You couldn't do like you had to pick the same like clone characters. So if you picked Jimmy, you had to pick Jimmy and Billy. If you picked Linda, it'd be 2 Lindas. And they did kind of change the graphics, so it did look nice, but it wasn't 2 players. Okay, and then just to add on to that, when I found out that the Sega Master System had it, and it was actually 2 players, I was hating big time. I was so jealous that the NES didn't have it like the Sega Master System. Now don't get me wrong, I feel like the NES version plays better, but the Master System had 2 players, so it kind of put it on par just with the fact that it was 2 people playing, because that was a big deal back in the day. NES games, if you could play with a buddy with games like Russian Attack or Life Force, where you have 2 people on the screen, that was huge because you could play with your friend and play in real time. So Double Dragon, and then on top of that, Double Dragon 1 also changed the story. It wasn't like the arcade. It was kind of like it, but in some ways it was a lot different, where you had to like earn your moves. I mean, it was a fun game, but I don't think I didn't get that arcade feel from Double Dragon. It was kind of its own thing, if you will. So other game companies quickly followed with home versions. So we'll take a look at a few here. And each version had its own unique features and flaws. So here's how Double Dragon, in my opinion, broke down on different systems. First up, like I talked about earlier, you had the Sega Master System. And this version did include 2-player co-op, which made fans happy. The graphics were colorful, and it felt a lot like the arcade game. Many players say it was one of the best home versions. I don't know. It was closer to the arcade than the NES, but it was kind of based off the NES. If you look at the sprites and the characters, and even some of the same moves, and even some of the same moves and animations they had, they kind of looked. The NES ones looked a lot cleaner, but the Master System ones, they did have all your moves unlocked right out the gate. It was more true to the arcade, but at the same time, the hit collision was bad on it. I mean, it was kind of choppy, and music didn't sound as good as the Nintendo one. So there were some trade-offs. Kudos to them for having 2 players. Next up, we talk about the Atari 2600, and yes, Double Dragon was on the Atari 2600 as one of the later games in the Life system. And this one was rough. The Atari 2600 was already very old and on life support by this time, and it just couldn't handle too much. The graphics were blocky, the gameplay was very limited, but it was still impressive that the game ran at all on such a simple machine. Now, this is probably the worst incarnation of Double Dragon I've ever played in my life. This game sucked. The only thing that this game did that was redeeming, it had 2 players. The NES one didn't, but this one had 2 players, but it was just so bad. I mean, the sprites look just like the other sprite. Look like they're wearing these hats, and I mean, there's a drop kick in the game, and there's an elbow smash. If you look at the example that played, but it's just a terrible game. Don't even waste your time with this one. Enough said. And next up, we got the Commodore 64 Amiga version, and the popular home computer Double Dragon looked and sounded different. I mean, some versions had choppy animations, others had strange controls, but it was still exciting to see the game on a keyboard-based system. Now, the Commodore 64 version, it's okay. I don't think it's great, but if you play it with a control, I mean, you got a kick, you got a punch, you got a jump kick. I think the elbow's like automatic, I think, when you do it. I never really played this version of the game. I've seen it, but I've never really played it, and it's okay. From a little bit I played of it, it's not the worst version. I think it's kind of awkward with the movement, and on top of that, the bad guys, they're too fast. I mean, in the original Double Dragon, you can kind of outrun the bad guy a little bit. Here, the gang members, they're just as fast as you are, so it's kind of hard to get that separation to get your moves in. And the characters do look a little different on the Commodore version, but I will say this, I mean, it's a different take on it. I mean, they gave a Bobo different moves. One thing I didn't like was all the enemies looked the same, but they did have Linda in there. So I mean, it was kind of cool. It's different. So, but it wasn't the worst game. And then you had the Game Boy version, which, you know, the black and white handheld version of the game. And at the time, I mean, I'll give it props. It was a fun way to take Double Dragon on the go. I mean, it didn't look as good as the NES, but it had heart, and fans loved having it in their pocket. I mean, the Game Boy version, to me, it was based off the NES version, but it was actually pretty cool. You had, it looked like Double Dragon. I mean, it was the sprites were a little bigger. Obviously, it's a Game Boy, so the screen's going to be smaller, but for what it was, I mean, it was pretty awesome. Now it's a pretty good port of the game for the Game Boy. And there's too many more to list. I mean, PC, you had the Genesis version, which was actually pretty good. And versions came out for DOS computers and lesser known systems, Atari ST, ZX Spectrum, Amstrad PC. Each and every one had its quirks. Some had missing music, some had lost entire levels. So Double Dragon was so big, that was one of those games, kind of like Pac-Man. Well, I don't know, Pac-Man had a lot of knockoffs, but these were official, for the most part, Double Dragon games. So at the time, Double Dragon was so huge, every console wanted it and every console got it. Some versions better than others, but it was on the platforms. So that's huge. So let's give the arcade a little more love. What tied all these versions together was a simple goal. They wanted to capture the feeling of the arcade, the thrill of fighting alongside a friend, the danger of walking down a pixelated street, knowing that the odds are against you, the power of picking up a weapon and turning the tide of battle. And even when the graphics weren't perfect on some of these systems, the music was off or the spirit of teamwork was gone, the action still shined through. Double Dragon didn't just cross borders for the home consoles, it crossed platforms, generations, and expectations. I mean, it was a true global success in the arcade and at home. But Double Dragon was so popular, of course, it did have a lot of spin-offs. Double Dragon wasn't just a one-hit wonder, it became a full-blown franchise that tried to take over the world of entertainment in more ways than one. After the original arcade took gamers by storm in 1987, it wasn't long before a sequel arrived. In 1988, Double Dragon 2: The Revenge hit arcades and home consoles. This game picked up right where the story left off. The villains had struck again, and this time killing Marion, Billy's girlfriend. The brothers were out for revenge. The sequel added a darker tone, more dramatic storytelling, and exciting new moves like the hurricane kick. The graphics were a little bit better, and the controls felt tighter, and the game allowed players to fight enemies using a wider range of attacks. Then came Double Dragon 3: The Rosetta Stone. Released in 1990, yeah, this game came out in 1990, and I'm just gonna be real with you guys, this game sucked. It sucked for a number of reasons. For one, it was an arcade game where you didn't have all your moves. Fine, you can unlock your moves, but you actually had to pay for your moves. So you could go into these little like stores or whatever, and you had to put real money in to buy move sets. Move sets, you can buy power-ups, you can buy back more energy. In today's world of live service, that doesn't sound too crazy now, but back then, real money, and it was real money now, I guess, you know, if you want to call it like Call of Duty, I'm looking at you, COD points, but anyway, yeah, back then a quarter was a big deal for a kid, and you mean tell me in the first 2 games I could do all my moves out the gate, and now I gotta pay money, and it just looked bad. The animation was, it was like they took a backseat. The animation was bad on it. It didn't look like Double Dragon, and it definitely didn't play like Double Dragon. So this was probably one of the worst Double Dragon translations in the series, in my opinion. This is probably the worst. Probably, you know, except for Atari 2600, but outside of that, this game's bad. But believe it or not, the home port, and that's a story for another time, but the home port was actually pretty good, in my opinion. So by 1992, the series jumped onto the Super Nintendo with Super Double Dragon. And this version brought smoother animations, better graphics, and a new combo system that let players chain attacks together. It felt more technical, almost like a martial arts simulation. You could block attacks, counter enemies, and even grab and throw in different ways. And although it didn't quite reach the popularity of the earlier games, it showed that Double Dragon was still alive and well. But then things started to get a little weird in the franchise. In the mid-1990s, Double Dragon tried to go beyond video games. There was a Saturday morning cartoon show loosely based on the games. It followed Billy and Jimmy Lee as they fought evil with the power of the dragon. It had lasers, martial arts, futuristic villains, and surprisingly, believe it or not, deep lore for a kids show. It only lasted 2 seasons, but it did get a cult following, along with toys, action figures, and their own video game. You remember that bad one where it's actually pretty good, the fighting game version of it. It was right around, it was after the Street Fighter craze, and it's basically a Street Fighter clone. Fun game. I mean, for me, I liked it. I mean, it might not be your cup, but I remember the whole bad thing. They were like Ryu and Ken. They had the hurricane kick, dragon punch, and they win dragon win. I mean, if you played that game back in the day, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. I played worse. Now the cartoon wasn't too bad, but then came the live action movie, Double Dragon, in 1994. It starred Mark Dacascos and Scott Wolf as the lead brothers. But let's just say this movie sucked. The movie had, and I hate to say that because honestly, I love Mark Dacascos. I'm probably messing his name up, but I love his movies. I mean, yeah, he's been in a lot of B-rated movies, but the dude's just cool. I like his movie. I loved him in American Samurai. And just to throw it out there, I always felt like they should have made I mean, I think they did have a Tekken movie, but I always felt like he looked just like Kazuya from Tekken 2, Tekken 1. I mean, spot on. He would have been the perfect Kazuya. Perfect. And as much as I love Mark Dacascos, even he couldn't save this movie. And that's saying something, because I love some B-rated movies. And this is kind of off topic, but I loved, like I said, American Samurai. Any kind of, back in the old day, any kind of kung fu movie Canon made, like Bloodsport or anything. Awesome B-rated movies. But yeah, the movie sucked. Double Dragon, the movie sucked. I mean, most of the plot was completely different. I mean, the movie had only a few things in common with the games, like names of the characters, and most of the plot was completely different. It was set in a post-apocalyptic future and involved magical medallions, mutant henchmen, over-the-top action. It tried to mix martial arts with comedy, sci-fi, but it just didn't land well with the critics or the fans. And the movie bombed at the box office and is remembered today as so bad it's good. I mean, one of those so bad it's good cult movies. Still though, the fact Double Dragon had its own movie, along with the cartoon and merchandise, and that shows how huge the brand had become. It wasn't just a simple beat 'em up anymore, it was a cultural phenomenon, even if some of the spin-offs were more memorable than others, for better or worse. So lastly, let's talk about the legacy that Double Dragon left behind, and is still trailblazing to this day. As time marched on, Double Dragon slowly faded into the background. In the late 1980s, it at once ruled arcades, turning heads with its gritty style and exciting two-player action. But like most games, as the years rolled on, new beat-em-ups began stealing the spotlight. Games like Final Fight, Streets of Rage, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those introduced fresh ideas, bigger sprites, smoother gameplay, and better visuals. And for a while, it seemed like the Lee brothers, Billy and Jimmy, might be gone for good, lost in the past like a forgotten legend. But legends never stay buried forever. In 2003, nearly 15 years after the original arcade release, Double Dragon Advance arrived on the Game Boy Advance, and fans were thrilled. This wasn't just a port, it was a love letter to everything that made Double Dragon great. With crisp pixel art, smooth animations, and new moves, this version expanded their original story and brought back familiar faces with updated flair. Players could punch, kick, elbow, and knee their way through the brand new levels. Even longtime fans were surprised by the depth and challenge packed with this handheld hit. It was proof that the Lee brothers still had a little bit of fight left in them. And then in 2012, almost a decade later, Double Dragon returned again. This time with neon lights, cheesy one-liners, and tons of 1980s attitude. You had Double Dragon Neon. And this was more than a game, it was kind of like a time machine, if you will. With bold, bright graphics, a rockin' synth-heavy soundtrack, and over-the-top enemies, this version leaned heavily into humor and nostalgia. And it was good to see Billy and Jimmy come back, cracking jokes and high-fiving between battles. The game introduced mixed tapes that gave players new powers and abilities, adding a new layer of strategy to the classic brawling formula. And some fans were put off by the goofy tone, others embraced it for what it was, but to me it was a wild and fun tribute to the decade that birthed the franchise. And in 2017, the original creators of Double Dragon Arc System Works decided to go back to the beginning, Double Dragon 4, and these were based off graphics that looked like they came straight from the NES days. And it was a bold move. While other franchises chased realism and high-definition graphics, Double Dragon 4 focused on raw nostalgia. The gameplay was tough, the visuals were retro, and the story continued right where Double Dragon 2 left off. Now, it didn't win over every player, but it captured the hearts of those who missed the 8-bit era and wanted to relive the challenge of classic side-scrolling combat. And in the most recent outing for these guys are Double Dragon Gaiden, Rise of the Dragons. And this game released in 2023 and brought a modern twist to the series. It combined classic beat-em-up action with roguelike elements, meaning the game changed every time you played it. There were new characters, new missions, and a cool tag mechanic that let players switch between fighters during battles. With slick combat-style graphics, and this version reimagined the world of Double Dragon while staying true to its roots. The action was fast and satisfying, and every run felt different thanks to the random mission orders and upgraded paths. For a long time, fans, newcomers alike, it felt like a bold step forward. So across nearly 4 decades, Double Dragon has transformed again and again and again. Sometimes serious, sometimes silly, but always having that fighting spirit. Each new version brought something fresh to the table, but they all carried the same spirit. Two brothers standing side by side, fists raised, ready to fight for what's right. Now, what did I think about Double Dragon? I'm just talking about the arcade, because overall I could be here all day talking about Double Dragon because they had so many incarnations, rebirths of the game. But Double Dragon Arcade for me, like I say, it holds a special place in my heart. It was one of those games where, you know, it was raw at the time. It was something brand new at the time. I mean, you had, like you said, you had fighting games, you had Renegade, you know, stuff like that. I think maybe, I can't remember if My Hero was around at the time, Vigilante or something like that. I don't know if they were before, I can't remember if they were before or after Double Dragon, but anyway, Double Dragon they were all one-player games, and Double Dragon set a precedence that games moving forward would have 2 players. And from a business standpoint, it made more sense for 2 people to play at the same time as opposed to just one. That's 2 quarters as opposed to 1 quarter, so that made sense. The colors were great. It didn't talk or anything, but the grunts and moans from the characters on the game, the fact that you actually had a guy in there, and I want to talk about this one part, which I think they put on purpose, and maybe it's just me, but that jump on the 3rd level across that bridge, you can do it now with ease, but back in the day, it was kind of hard making that jump, you know? So I think that was there to try to get more quarters. Also, the sliding wall that came out, that was ingenious at the time. There was so many quarter grabbing elements at the end of Double Dragon. The fact that, you know, you're in the last part and the wall slide out, those things take a lot of damage and they're random. Then those spikes that come down like this, that was pretty cool as well. That's taking a few minutes if you keep getting hit by it. You could fall off platforms, and then you got the Machine Gun Willie and in the throne room, and he could actually just shoot you and one-shot you. So yeah, it definitely was designed to make you spend money, but it was fun. It was super fun every step of the way. So Double Dragon for me is probably one of the, obviously the grandfathers of beat 'em up genre, but it was just a game. If you played it in real time through Dragon, it's not even a word, but I'm just gonna say it, Double Dragon Mania or the Double Dragon phenomenon, definitely that was a time to be alive. Like I said, the game was everywhere. It was, you couldn't go to any arcade without having 1 to 2 arcade Double Dragon arcade machines. And on top of that, every mom and pop shop, they had it. It was everywhere. It was kind of like Street Fighter before Street Fighter in the sense of the game being available. So Double Dragon definitely, would I play it today again? Oh, I play it all the time. Now, one thing I will share with you guys, one of the highlights of my achievements was the Xbox 360 days when they had Xbox Arcade, Xbox Live Arcade, and they re-released Double Dragon for the Xbox Live Arcade. And that's when they first introduced the online leaderboards. Bullcrap you not, I was actually #1. It was only for like maybe a couple of days because people ended up doing it, but I had the high score in the world. And that's what I did and got that high score. Eventually people passed it, but yeah, Rude Tuna, #1. So I'm proud of that, even though it was minimum to some people, to me it was a big deal. So that's gonna do it with Double Dragon, guys, but please share your experiences with this awesome game, and definitely I would recommend you playing. If you somehow never played Double Dragon before, give it a playthrough and play the other iterations as well. Not all of them, but some of them. They actually made some pretty good Double Dragon games along the franchise. So, but that's gonna do it, guys. As always, take care of yourself, protect your inner peace. God bless you, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for watching.